Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Leading with Light. Are you hearing me, Dr. Leslie? I'm having some issues with my equipment here.
Yes, I hear you just fine. Is it
And
reciprocating?
yes, it is. It is. Good. So we are about to move into a great discussion this morning. And I have with me Dr. Leslie Flowers. She's going to introduce herself, and then I'm going to move with introducing myself and go straight into our program for this morning. Right ahead, Dr. Leslie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marcia, for inviting me. I always enjoy our conversations. And today's the first day, really, that I thought about, well, what is my title? And I quickly looked to see what are the other things for teacher and all that. And so I came up with teacher and mentor, really simple. I am an expert in applying the principles of success from Think and Grow Rich, also universal laws, the 7 of them, also the laws of achievement. And I have been fortunate and focused in the last 17 years in going very deep into how these things work and what the process is, Dr. Marcia, behind them so that we can duplicate the process. I think we're all doing things and we all are born with everything we need. We've heard this before, and I'm sure it's written, isn't it? That we are born having everything we need. So if we assume that that is accurate, then we're just so overloaded with information, or we've forgotten what we knew, or we never really saw clearly what we were actually doing. So that's me, and thanks for inviting me.
Yes. And Dr. Leslie's been very humble. She's an expert in so many things. She is a powerhouse, and she empowers persons to dig deep into themselves, to find answers, and to change their circumstances through thought and through being present in your moment and being mindful. And that's the part of her that pulls me very deep to her, because I try to help persons to get to that place, changing their lives and their outcomes. For those who don't know me, I am Dr. Marcia Thomas, and I really am a faith-based Christian leadership life coach and leadership consultant. And I'm about Christian empowerment in life and leadership. And so today we want to move into a topic, a game-changing topic. Good morning, Lisa. I'm using 2 devices because I'm having issues with one. So today we want to go into a game-changing topic. It's about how we handle emotions and the lifespan of emotions in our lives and in our leadership. And so we want to understand that emotions are inevitable. Everybody goes through a range of emotions, and everybody has to deal or handle those emotions. Life throws us curveballs, and sometimes it disturbs our spirit, and there are sometimes that it rocks us very heavily. And we want to understand that this is, in the instance, we want to react instead of respond. Today, we want to talk about how we get to that place where we have our emotions intact and so controlled that it's not separated from us, but it doesn't control us. It doesn't monitor us, and it doesn't pull us to a point where we give in or we give up. And so we're going to talk about 5 critical stages. All right. So I persons like to talk, have asked me over the period to have my PowerPoints. And so for that reason, I pull into the PowerPoint for the moment here as we pull in Dr. Leslie as we go through with our discussion. So every emotion has a lifespan. That's my thought that I want you to keep in mind. And the most successful leaders master the middle of that journey. Let's go again. Every emotion has a lifespan, and the most successful leaders master the middle of that journey. Thank you for joining, Janice. I see you there. We are not, I'm using two devices, as I said. For those who are joining, those who are coming in, we want to thank you. We want to thank you very much. So we want to talk about the 5 stages of emotional mastery. And I have with me, as I said, the expert on that. And so we want to talk about the 5 stages. What would you say is the greatest challenge, Dr. Leslie, as we talk about emotions and the lifespan and how it triggers leaders? What do you think are the triggers, the emotional triggers for leaders as we move into the 5 stages? Let's talk about the triggers first, because every emotion moves from a trigger to legacy and moves through these 5 distinct phases. So let's hear from your expertise and your experience, what do you think are the triggers of emotions for leaders, for individuals, and also for leaders?
Well, this is a really great topic, and thank you for all your kind words. So, the thing that triggers leaders triggers everybody. And over my experience, what I can tell you I know is that they come from fears. And we've discussed this before. We have basic fears, they're real. We believe them because we experience them. You know, a lot of times I think that in today's time and everybody's opinion matters and their view matters. But I've heard a lot about, fear isn't real. And I know we are not supposed to focus on it, but what I've learned is other than God, the things we have the most faith in are the things we're afraid of. And we're afraid of them because we've experienced it. It's part of life. So are we going to ignore them, right? So that as not to face them? What we know is that what we resist persists. So if we resist understanding the fears and how we got them, which gives us access to managing them as leaders, as anyone. If we do that, then we can be clear about what actions to take. And these 5 steps are really a really good process. So, yes, what we resist persists. The opposite is even better. When we choose it, it disappears. So, right? When we resist something, it's top of mind. So, if we resist that fear was real or that we shouldn't be paying attention to it, I invite you to look at fear with curiosity because it's the other side of faith. And only one thought will prevail in any given moment. So the emotional triggers come from our childhood, our experiences. They're strong because emotions aren't really thinking. As you've said, they're reacting. We want to be on the other side, if you will, with another choice, which is responding, thinking, and living in faith. So we don't ever get there, but the aspiration is to understand, and that's what we're going to look at. Why? And because I will tell you that there's a difference between emotions and feelings, and we can talk about that later. So you go ahead and I forgot to say that, but we can talk about that later. Does that
Good.
help? Is that good?
It helps a lot, and it has set the stage for where I want to go, because my next question would be digging into the difference between emotions and feelings. And in the 5 model that Dr. Leslie pulled forth, we just want to make you aware of the 5 models in our training and from our
Yes.
background as
Yeah.
coaches and as educational leaders and so on. And so there is 5 stages. The awareness stage is what we call the spark. and then there is, or the trigger, and then there is the acceptance stage, which is a crucial moment of choosing, which is what we are looking at as thinking, where you decide to step away from the immediate surge or trigger. And then there is the magic happens processing and the application stage. And so at that stage, we want to transform what is raw and what is real into actionable insight. Meaning we want to learn from it. And then we want to also look at the growth and integration, which is where we have lasting impact and transformation, where we manage it to the tail. So the goal of emotional leadership is to shift your focus from simply feeling to actively progressing through each step and each stage successfully. And for that, we want to understand the difference between feelings and emotions, and when is each important? When should we choose each? Let's hear you, Dr. Leslie. What is the
Well,
difference between emotions and feelings? And is there a point in your life or your leadership where you should choose to feel, or you should choose to go much deeper, where you begin to understand and manage your emotions?
yeah, great question. We understand better as we understand our mind and how we think. And when we react to a trigger, somebody says something and it upsets us. That wasn't their intention necessarily. It usually isn't. But based on our own fear of, and this one happens to be criticism or judgment, rather than stopping and thinking about it and responding, the trigger of the fear, which is emotions, and it's not thinking, is strong and stronger than our ability to begin with to outweigh that fear. So emotions are tied to the subconscious, where what we totally believe is there: belief in God and belief in our fears and our fears. And
Very much.
we want to we want to grow our ability and deservability, but our fears don't let us do that. So when you're able to see this and you feel yourself getting triggered, that is where you can stop for a moment and choose the opposite, and stop yourself from allowing your mouth to react. In that moment, you're moving into the aspiration of faith. You're now responding thoughtfully, and you're now feeling quite different. So, triggers are emotional, they're uncontrollable enemies, but we are learning how, once we catch this first one, and then another one, and then another one, to think the opposite, look for the good, realize that we're being triggered, then we generate a feeling, a feeling of wellness, of faith. We feel good. So again, this is the faith. So we never really arrive, Dr. Marcia. It's an
Mhm.
aspiration to, you have to continually catch these. But what do we have? 50,000 thoughts a day? How many get through? And, we could go around being the victim, but the more you practice catching these things and understanding, well, what is your fear? Why am I doing this? Why, when anybody brings up money, why do I feel bad? Why do I get emotional? Why do I start thinking about things and that I don't deserve? Why does that happen? Once you understand how it happens, you can very easily shift your thinking. But remember, the triggers are not thinking, they're
Mhm.
reacting like an animal,
Mhm.
if you will. Does that
Very
answer
much
the
so.
distinction for you?
It, it,
Thank you.
it, it it puts the distinction in sharp focus, because feelings are instinctive reactions. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying. Your
That's
feelings can
correct.
be more instinctive and very
Yes.
reactive, as against your emotions are monitoring and managing, where you now dig a little deeper and you become aware and you make choices based on facts rather than
Yes.
emotions or
You're
logic.
thinking
Very
as
good. And
opposed
I
to
hope everybody understand that. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
No, I'm
sorry.
just going to say you're thinking rather than reacting. So you
Very much
can't do
so.
both. You can't do both. So what does a leader do? Well, you have to understand the source of why you're being triggered so that you can counteract the process so that you can stop it. But you want to, when we're confused about fears and are they enemies, are they real, etc., we're not going to take any action. But I have discovered, Dr. Marcia, if we're willing and ready to just really take a look at what these fears might be from our own
Mhm.
life, then that's the first step. And that's what you're talking about with awareness. And then you're accepting or you're considering, okay, wait a minute, there is another way to think.
Very much so. And at the beginning, what the five stages indicate is that at the beginning, welcome Tracy, thank you for joining. I see you there. Simone, I see you. Franklin, thanks for joining. I'm using two equipment, as I told you before. But in the thinking stage, the two top in the thinking part of emotions, the two top stages, the first two stages kick in, where you become aware of the shift that you're talking about, the shift in your mind, the mental shift, when things are changing and when you're actually reacting, and you might act out of fear, out of anger, out of passion, out of the fact that you do not like criticism. And then you also choose to pause where necessary, because as leaders, you're expected to have it together and you're really expected to respond objectively and to actually be able to deal with people justly and to actually be open for criticism and for analysis. And so when that happens, when you get to the point where you do not allow your emotions to master you, you take that necessary pause that allows you to now think about it, as Dr. Leslie is saying. How are you triggered? Why are you triggered? What in your past or in your childhood or in some experience pulls you to be so fearful of criticism or judgment, or to be so fearful of being vulnerable and being authentic? And then there is a processing now, where when it gets a little deeper, which is what we're going to be going into now, analyzing the feeling to extract the insight and decide on your action. And then there is the development now of a new story, of a new skill, and of a new maturity. And I said last week that maturity often does not move with age. Sometimes maturity, age walks alone. And I'm very, very certain about that. And so when you codify the learning and turn it into a leadership habit, a positive leadership habit, it allows you to deal with emotions. So let's talk about, when we talked about last week, leaders who suffer loss and who have to forgive. What is the fear that would drive an emotional response in a leader who is hurt by a team member, somebody who doesn't want to apologize, or somebody that is just on fear or selfish, as against the fear that drives this leader when they suffer the loss of a relationship, or grappling with a child that is terminally ill, or having to take care of parents and are very burnt out? Is the emotions aligned? Are they integrated? Is the response the same? What do they do? How do these emotions impact how they operate in their life and leadership?
Well, that's a loaded question. Can you bring it down to one one sentence?
Okay,
Because
so
I
so so,
can't
so
know
the
because
one
as
sentence would be, based on
okay.
the happenings in your life, whether
Mm,
it is a personal or a professional one.
mm, mm.
What are the fears that would drive the emotions If somebody is
Mm,
experiencing stress
mm,
or betrayal or disappointment or loss.
mm. Okay, good. This is good because I have an example um, for this, which is me. You see, the leader never actually gets rid of the fears, even when you've developed faith through repetition. So, when we get to the processing, now we're starting to apply this way of thinking. And I know these things very well. So, for me, I'm going to give you an example of what happened. And this is just awful for me because I am a leader and I've practiced this, but it just goes to show you that you
You're
never
human.
really reach it. So I'm downsizing right now, and my children, my two children, have gone through their dad's stuff and my stuff. Their dad has passed away, and they figured who's going to get what, etc. And my daughter took a whole collection of Life magazines, which we thought holding on to them would make us very rich, but that's not true, right? Things change. And as I'm downsizing, I see all the 40 the boxes of LPs, the big vinyl records that my husband primarily and I purchased over 50, 60 years. And these are the records that the children heard as they were growing up. And without thinking, when my son was over, I said, "You go ahead and take these to your house. Your sister has the Life magazines." Now, I'm doing this without being kind, right? You go ahead and take this, right? And just don't, you can sell it, do whatever you want. But these were your dad's and my records. Well, because that was being fair. When I talked to my daughter and told her, she crumbled. And I said, "Oh my God." She said, "But Mama, that's all I have left of Daddy." And she started crying. And those are the albums. And you let everybody, she wasn't criticizing me, but this is the fear of loss of love.
Hmm.
This is the one that I hurt my daughter without meaning to, without intention. She said, "I get that, Mama." I said, "Well, then tell me, what can I do to make it right?" And we talked a little bit. And so I called my son and I said, "I've made a mistake. Please, can you and your sister together, before you do anything with those records, go through them together and let her pick out the ones that she wants? And you can also do the same with the Life magazines." And he agreed. So for a leader, it could be loss of love, but mostly in business. So this was a personal example. In business, it's usually fear of looking bad,
Hmm.
fear of criticism. Well, what will people think? Right away, we're worried. And that is the fear of judgment and criticism. That's the main one for leaders. What am I going to look if I do this?
Hmm.
What are people going to think of me? And that is a huge one. As far as personal, that was my own personal share. And let me tell you, I was distraught over it. I know you know, right? I know everybody knows when you go to do something that you think is fair and kind, but I didn't think through it enough. I didn't pause, and I could have. So that's just to tell you that it's an ongoing process.
Yes.
I hope that answers your question.
And I think it's benefiting persons because as leaders, the point that was made, especially with that personal example, is that leaders are humans, and
Mm,
you have feelings. Even
mm,
though there is a pressure to hold it all together and to always be in control and to always have the answer and to lose yourself or lose the connection with yourself, with your voice, with your ambition. You are human. And when you get into your personal relationships, you are reminded, because sometimes you end up hurting those who you love the most.
mm.
And because of how you are reacting to your pressure and your stress. I want to put that in, or to
Yes.
how you're navigating the hurt that you might be feeling or the loss, regardless of what the loss is. And that's a very important point that I'm taking. Thank you for joining, Tracy. I see you there. Yes. And Sharon, thank you so much for joining. And then The example you gave about business, this loss of title, of your role, of your responsibility, of your status, of digging into making your responsibility or your position or your title, your personality or your identity, can shift things for you and can make emotions run very wild. I thank you for
Mhm.
those two. And so for that reason, you made a point there that I want to dig into that is really important for the first stage. You accepted that you may have hurt your daughter. You reached out. And so you began to take the steps of applying or processing because of the awareness. And so the first step that I would put out there for persons to understand how you handle your emotion as a leader is that you really recognize the trigger or the signs. You pay attention to what is said and what is not said. So as a leader, somebody might say something to you and your reaction is immediate anger or outburst or it's lashing out, or you might find that you begin to breathe very heavily, or you have rapid breathing, or your chest get tight, or there is just this reaction that's there's this great feeling or surge of discomfort. You want to look at what is triggering it, and you want to make sure that you do not allow your emotions to run, because you will become what the Bible says, a river that overflows its banks. And so you want to also look at accepting the feeling that you must pause, you must hold on a little before you respond. This is not weakness, neither is it what people would call suppression. Nobody is overpowering you. It's common sense. It's a strategic delay that make you take back control of your emotions. And so I want to give leaders a tool kit that you want to take, and I call it anchor, and you breathe, name it. So first of all, you want to physically stop, or you want to step away. What I call it is having your feet firmly planted on the ground. Don't allow anything to shake you or lift your core values or who you really are and want to be remembered for. And then you want to be able to take some deep, conscious, present, active listening strategy, and that is the breath. I call it breathing. And then because you want to be able to brace yourself to hear, really hear what the person is saying and focus on what is being said, the key things that would be pain points or problems, and not the fluff or fierceness of the criticism or the attack. And then you want to name it. You want to say to them, I see that you're a little anxious about this or that. How, and that's exactly what you did, Leslie. And that's where I'm going. You ask, how can I make it right? So you want to name it. You want to identify, you want it to move from just a body response to a mind and heart response. And so it moves me into the next part of it, where you after naming the frustration, the disappointment, the hurt, whatever it is, and regaining control, what would you say are the most common emotional challenges that leaders face or individuals face, and how can they address it? And give me some pointed examples, because you're good at that, and those examples push me into a discussion that I was not ready for, but here we go.
Well,
Here we go.
ask me that
What
question
are the
again.
most common emotional challenges? If we are to put them into a basket, what would be the most common? Because we realize that we as individuals, we have several fears. We have identified them: criticism, judgment, loss,
Yeah,
poverty, and so on, and love. But right now, the loss of love is important and was highlighted in relation to personal, and the loss
yeah.
of control for business. No, I'm saying, if you're to talk about it now, what would you say are the common challenges though? Because everybody has a different situation, a different story, a different struggle. So what would be common among all of those? What would be the most common emotions that you find that persons are not controlling, or find that they release that more often than not, much to their dislike or their displeasure?
So I think where you're going is the negative emotions,
Yes.
right? Okay, so keep in mind that there is always its exact opposite, right? So that's where I was going. And you have to be vulnerable with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had to complete that. And as you said, with someone who is working for you, or you're the leader and they are the staff, if you will, that reports to you, or you're on a different level, you know, you it's so important to be able to, what you had said, listen. So even if you do get angry, if you're angry, it's because of you. And so you've got to catch that and then ask them exactly what is bothering them. And this is because I heard my daughter, I thought she do her throat, she got choked, like I thought I heard her cry, right? Or she got choked up. And so you have to be ready and willing to be vulnerable, right? And to realize that you've done something that hurt someone else. So that's where you must complete. A leader will own it. A leader will complete. So it could be anger, it could be disappointment, it could be annoyance, right? That you've given this particular task to this person and they're just not getting it together, right? They, by now, with what you've shown them, you expected more. Did you share your expectations? Because many times leaders expect things, but maybe they haven't shared clearly what they wanted. So you've done all these things, you've shared, the person knows, and now they're just irritating you, right? You're frustrated. And frustration is one of these things. Out of frustration often comes a need for growth and change. So, really, when I was in business, it would be frustration, irritation, not usually anger, but it all has to do with my own frustration with myself. You see, we are reflections of each other. So if I get irritated by you, Dr. Marcia, okay, without you even knowing, I take something and make it mean something else, right? There's something about me that has done that. I recognize that thing I don't like in myself by finding it in you. So, what do I do? In order to train my mind and make it a habit and then have faith, habits and faith are different. Habits don't stick necessarily, faith does. So if you think you've created a habit, that is not faith. You still have to continue working on it because these fears have been part of our life for decades, our entire life. And now I've gone off on a tangent. So I forgot where I was.
No, we're really coming back to what are the common emotional challenges.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes.
Those are the
And
ones. And the thing is that it's a process. You won't be able to do this. I do want to share one thing I thought of, which is really cute. One of the ways for, have we gotten down to processing yet?
we're going to go there right after.
Okay. 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 Well, and the reason I say that is there are tricks, if you will. There are ways to to teach yourself. Like, for example, when I coached girls for a volleyball for our high school team, I learned that as a referee, excuse me, not a coach, a referee, that the people on the back line could not come up to the front line to spike the ball.
Yes.
Your setter, okay. So I learned that. So what I would do is I had a rubber band on my right hand, and when the team on the right was serving, right? Because sometimes they go back and forth, and you kind of lose who had the ball. Then I would move the rubber band over to my left hand when it was now the other team. So there were ways. So I just want to tell you this funny thing. You can do this for yourself. It's a great way to save money and to make a change really quickly. When I was learning sales, and for 3 years, every month, I was in the top three persons when I was younger in a 9-chain figure salon. That's a health club. Anyway, I was very negative, and my manager had a PhD in psychology. This is like in 72. Okay, this is a long time ago. And I just had a negative attitude. Negative, negative. I didn't even know. I mean, just everything was sarcastic, negative. And she said, "Leslie," she said, "sit down here." She said, "I want you to stop saying negative things. And here's what I want you to do. Whenever I hear you say anything negative, I want you to put a dime on my bookshelf." I said, "Okay." A dime. Okay. So we talked a lot. It took 3 dimes for me to stop speaking negatively, because there was something about that fear of poverty, that it was the irritation of having, and she would say, "You stop right now." I did this with a client who had a similar issue, like saying, "I'm sorry." She kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And that's a habit that's she really wanted to get rid of. So I said, "Okay, every time you complete the word sorry, you must put a $5 bill in an envelope in your car, and you may not touch it for sodas or anything like that." And she said, "When can I open it?" I said, "Let's go a month." All that was in there was $20. So there's some sort of magical connection with making yourself pay yourself to, and maybe it is with the fear of poverty, but you can put these physical reminders, right? You can use sticky notes. You can have a screensaver. These visual reminders will stop us, right? And can stop us. But again, it's one by one. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Let's wrap it up for our listeners, and then I'm gonna focus on a question that Nick has posed. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining and for participating. I see you also, Charito. Thank you for joining. But the most common challenges that you have highlighted so far is frustration and impatience. And you have also highlighted uh, procrastination. No,
Frustration, right? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I was
no,
thinking
go ahead.
about.
You highlighted frustration, and you say sometimes people just get frustrated with the outcome, or you get
Mm,
tired or impatient with the
mhm,
complaints and with the attitude, and that is very good, because frustration is the highest mark for a leader who things are not going as planned, or there are crises over and over, or there is a difficult team member or an uncooperative team member or someone that you just can't
mhm,
get to meet deadlines and so on. That can give you a great deal of frustration, and you can in fact react and
mhm,
react out of character because of your person's pressing into you to meet the deadline, and how the person is making you show up as irresponsible or someone who is not capable, and that can trigger things and give you surges of anger or desperation. And then if we talk about impatience, you can get impatient with mediocrity, with excuses, with complaint, and with victims, and with the blame games in your organization as leaders. And that for me is also a common trait, emotion that leaders are forced to contend with, because you are dealing with people. Leadership is not static, it is dynamic, and people come with their different baggages, and they come with their different emotions and the responses, and expect you to tolerate them, especially those who are very selfish. And so you might have this desire to avoid persons who are very difficult and who you are tired of, or you
mm,
just wish that they didn't come to work. And so leaders contend with these types of emotions. And we what you're really saying as we move into the processing side of it is that we have to decouple the feeling from the necessary action. And the moment you spoke, I placed it on the screen. because you had a good point right there. We have to decouple the feeling from the necessary action. And you gave some ways in which we can do it. And one of the examples that you gave is important. I'm going to dig into that accountability, personal accountability side of it as we go into the processing. But we want to answer Nick's question. And she's saying, how is it possible to feel the fear of criticism when your parents only praised you? And that for me, and I'm going to allow you to answer to Dr. Leslie, but for me, I find that persons can fear criticism when they are praised, because when you leave your parents, even even the fear of criticism from your parents who constantly praise you can make you the praise, sorry, the constant praise and approval from your parents or your family, especially those who are the only persons in their family who have achieved at a certain point, and so on. It gives you, it put this pressure on you of fear of not wanting to disappoint anyone. So you live up to their expectations and you try to meet their needs. So I find that leaders who are only child, or family members who are the firstborn or the last, or who may have done extremely well in their family, have a greater burden to not want to disappoint or having to meet unrealistic expectations, because the more you achieve is the more they think that you have become super and you are superhuman to the point where you can't make no mistakes, especially those parents who depend on you, so that you feel that you can't take a break and you must always be giving and pouring into them, and there is nobody to pour into you. So I think that it is
Mhm.
very possible to feel the fear of criticism because you don't want to disappoint. The unrealistic expectations, you still want to meet them. You want to be all things to all men. The moment that you can't, then you feel that you have failed. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts?
Well, I kind of look at that this a little differently, um, because these are outside influences now. So your parents, you remember them, right? And the way they treated your siblings was likely consistent, with both of you. But it's you were in school, you went to church, you went to the grocery store. You're affected by people who are unaware that they're criticizing you. And this happens through repetition. So, you know, you could have a very strong faith. And actually, I know Nick, and she has a great strength in not letting what other people think of her upset her. Now, this is a rare quality. I'm not sure how she got it, but it may be that she got that from her parents, that what other people think of her was not her business. And so I would assume that if you go to do something, anyone that you haven't done before, no matter what your parents said, you'd have a certain amount of fear, to your point, Dr. Marcia. So when we step out on faith and we go to do something we've never done before, we've failed at before, this is where the experience where the experience of her parents, and this is just, I'm no not a PhD, right? But I'm just, this is from what I understand, is that strength is what allows her to overcome that fear of criticism more easily than the rest of us whose parents, without knowing, did not do this. That's kind of how I look at it.
Good.
Good.
And so I am looking at, as we process, we are looking at analyzing the emotion or the root cause. So we decouple
Mm,
the feeling from the necessary action.
mm.
So as we do that, somebody might just be saying to me, somebody might just be saying to us, how can I, how can I differentiate between an emotional reaction and thoughtful response? What would you say to them if they are saying, I feel that I need to decouple the feeling from the necessary action, but how do I differentiate? How am I sure that I am differentiating between emotional reactions and thoughtful responses?
I think you answered it really well.
Hmm.
I mean, it's really taken the breath.
Yes.
It's really pausing. Can you catch yourself? Do you know enough about yourself? I know if I find you annoying, logically and thoughtfully, that I have been just as annoying. And we find ourselves being impatient with people we've already overcome this, right? So we're not as annoying now, but we sure as heck can spot it in someone else, can't we? Okay, so that actually brings back to life that negative part of us. So what you do is look for something good, anything good, and it doesn't have to be big. The law of relativity says that nothing has any value until you compare it to something else. That's why we're worried about what people will think about, because we're comparing ourselves to other people. But if you will, in that moment, if you will purposely say, okay, t- think of something good about this person. I don't care if they picked a cup up off the road and put it in their car rather than leave trash there. Something small. I don't care what it is. If you can find one good thing, and everybody has good things, you're beginning to create new neural pathways. You're
Mm.
now beginning to create faith in your ability to do this and your deservability to affect it with other people. So I think that the breath, you have to understand your fears. I mean, I talk about this a lot. Embrace them. I look at it this way. Let me just offer you this because I know we're running out of time here. I want you to picture yourself as the CEO of your company, and there are 6 board members. First, we've got the fear of criticism. Oh, Leslie, you failed at that before. Why don't you play small and not stick your neck out for a change? That's the fear of criticism. One of your board members, not very nice as an advisor. Then the next one says, well, you can't afford that. Don't invest. Remember the time when you invested and you took a bath? So that's your other one saying, don't do these things. Now remember, you're the CEO, but these are your advisors. Then you have the one who says, well, you shouldn't go to that large convention because it's not so far away from COVID. Right. And it's a real fear that you could. And by the way, I did catch COVID, years ago, even though I was inoculated when I went to the theater. Right. Okay. So this is real. So there's your third board member advising you that you're not going to look good, that you're a failure, that you can't afford it. And now that you're going to get sick. But wait, there's more. You could lose a loved one. So maybe it's a trip or what happened with me. Right. Then, oh, here's the next one. The fifth seat is held by the one that says, Leslie, you're too freaking old to do this. You've already passed your
Hmm.
prime, right? Just tell me that. And the last one is, yeah, but if you do that, you could drop dead today. None of us ever know. So now you're faced with 6 board members and you're the CEO. Allow me to show you how to fire every single one of them and replace them with their direct opposite.
Opposite.
Yes.
Very much so. And so the point that is being made in the processing or the application is that you find the value. Find the value. And sometimes finding the value, which is a very great example I think you made there, is that you have to stand alone and you have to
Mm.
reconnect to your vision and what was your mission. You have to reconnect to your purpose and you have to eliminate the network that is not able to see your vision or to participate in the fulfillment of that vision or dream. And so you want to, as it comes at you, you want to analyze the emotion and the root cause, and you want to stop judging the feeling and talking about you shouldn't feel this way or you should have gotten past this by now and so on. No, you want to start listening to the data. And notice what I said, start listening to the data, just as how you would listen to these board members,
Mm.
know what to
Mhm.
eliminate and what to push out. You want to listen to the data that is really the reality of what you are facing and the emotion and the source and the why of the emotion and the how of the emotion, because you want to be able to convert the insight into a concrete step, a step of releasing, whether it is firing or so on, which we call decoupling the feeling from the necessary action. And you want to ask questions like, what is the emotion trying to tell me about my values or my priorities that I'm being violated or upheld? What is it that it is telling me? And based on the answer, what do I need to do? And so the anger or the feeling, the disappointment or the betrayal can or might just be your clarity surge. It hits the reality. It pushes you back into what needs to be done. It propels you into your purpose, and it makes you release those things that are not important and look at what truly matters, especially in loss. And you are now able to schedule the action. You schedule the action into what we call a wake up call or a clarifying meeting, where you actually look at what steps need to be taken. And sometimes, because you have now taken a hard look and you have your head on your body and your feet firmly on the ground, because you are moving from facts and logics and not emotions, you are able to make straight paths for your feet. And so you can pull forward and do some things that would create the space for you to always be in control of yourself. And that is what we call now integration. So let's look at we have two more questions. When you are at this clarifying moment, because you have processed and you have applied it, you have looked at the root cause of the emotion, you have evaluated it, and you have taken the steps now to own it and to accept the truth about it and about yourself and about those who you are dealing with as a leader, and what needs to be done, especially if it's in business or in a particular downsizing or layoff or crisis. You want to be tuned in to understand that you must accept what you cannot change. What the next question I want to ask, now that you see through a dark space very clearly, because you have processed the information and you now have to apply the insight that the data presented, how do you communicate? What is an effective way to communicate emotions and needs in a leadership role?
That's a really good question. By the way, hi everybody. I just saw the chat. I just opened up the chat and saw everybody. So glad that you're here. Really, the next step is the solution.
Yeah.
Right? It's the thinking solution. I can give you a really quick example. When I managed huge documents for government proposals, that this medical company was going for very big wins. And everything had to be to the governmental offices, the proposals, by FedEx by 4 p.m. on the day it is due. Otherwise, your proposal would end in the trash. Anybody who's done RFPs with the government, you know that you have got to get it there. And so I actually had this one PhD who wrote in the proposal who would never stop writing. He would ignore the timeline. You have to have this finished by 11 a.m. today, because the production of these humongous 1,000-page documents took a whole day and we still had to get it to FedEx. And every single proposal, I would get anxious because the deadline would come closer and he would just keep writing. So what I did was, here was the solution. I was super frustrated with him because it was my responsibility to coordinate the team to produce these huge documents, like 25, 3,000 page documents in a production room, and I needed every minute. Okay, so I got smart. I started giving him an earlier time. And I told all the PhDs, these are due at 11 a.m. Well, I forgot to tell my team, right? And so was that right? Yeah. Anyway, they laughed because it still took till 1. But I had 2 hours that I could remind them. So they thought that they got to go past the 11 a.m. and I still got everything out at 1. Well, when you're triggered or frustrated, you're not thinking. So, what we do is once we get our feet, as you said, on the ground, we go for solutions.
Hmm.
What is going to make this right? What can I do? I said to my daughter, to make this right for you. How would it look if things were right again? And that is the leadership. That is the wherewithal to go beyond your frustration and get to the heart centered place, because you can't be in fear and faith. The faith was the love of my daughter and my intention not to hurt her. I had perfect faith in that. She did too. But still, when you see your daughter or you hear your daughter crying, there's nothing like a mother's love, and it just shook me. So
Hmm.
she said, "Well, we can talk about it tomorrow." I said, "No, no, I want to take care of this right now."
No. Hmm.
So I hope you enjoyed that little example. So it's solutions. That's where we're
Yes.
going immediately. Okay, what can I do? Maybe because of the frustration, Dr. Marcia, out of frustration, a lot of times comes great innovation.
Yes.
Right? The person who got tired with the old can opener, right? That had the key on it and your fingers were bent and bruised and you couldn't get that daggone can opener. And someone said, you know what? Enough of this. And then, so you got to be careful. And I did want to say one thing about values, because you really touched on that. Your values, always you want to do your best to aspire to lean toward heart-centered values, right? That it isn't really about you, it's about them. It's about serving others. So as soon as you catch yourself being triggered and really irritated, if you can teach yourself to stop a moment, your conscious mind will come in. It
I
will.
want us to, that is embedded in the next question. So I want you to remember and hold to that point as we look at because that's the final question. And so I want to summarize what we are learning here at this stage of integration and growth. Because after you become aware, which is stage one, and
Mhm,
after you accept, you consciously name the feeling, which is stage two, acceptance. After you process and get to the stage of applying, the growth stage is important, because the growth stage is where the change is integrated. And so as you look, every time you successfully navigate those three stages, you get to the point where you change. You either become more patient or more decisive, or you become more open and authentic, or you become more vulnerable, whatever is the solution. So say, for example, there is an issue in your organization that you find that in dealing with it, the documentation was not effective. Somebody spoke to me the other day about a situation at his institution, educational institution. He is the leader of his institution, and they were not able to make a decision because of the documentation. There was not enough documentation, and the person who was the offender got away because of that technicality. And so he is now insisting on documentation. That's one of the ways you integrate. You'll find that documentation was the issue. You'll become more intentional in making sure that things are documented, and that becomes an
mhm,
authentic response. If there was some panic because there was some maintenance issue, then maintenance becomes something that you really try to keep on top of, so that those things don't have or cause emotional triggers. And so you're no longer scrambling. Every time you understand the emotion, it is processed, and you see the how and the why, and you look at the concrete insight that you get from the data. You put these stop gaps in place as a leader to minimize or eliminate the emotion, because we don't want to suppress it. We want it to be negative emotions to be turned into positive ones, and
mhm,
so that the institution can grow and performance and motivation can be intact.
mhm,
And we want to maintain our positive emotions and build on them, so you come to work and you remain joyful in what you're doing, in whatever role or responsibility you have to carry out, and you're able to collaborate and so on. So let's look. As we look at that, when certain concrete steps are taken in our homes and in our institutions, they come with change because growth is comes with change. And there is now a codified system. The integration establishes what we call a codified system. So we codify the learning into a personal or a team system. What if, when that happens, there is conflict? How do we navigate complex emotional situations that involve conflict or this change? What would you say? And you started well with how we sort it out.
How we what? What did you say?
How do we effectively navigate complex
Ah,
emotional situations that come
okay.
with this change, this integration?
Okay, so if you have someone who's resistant in your staff to something that you're doing,
To
I
what?
had this.
To the change, because remember that the emotions
Yes,
were there. We did that, and then we came up with the system that would now minimize those emotional outbursts and those uncontrolled
yes,
emotions or trigger them. So there are some persons who will still be resistant because they don't
yes,
like the change. They don't want to
yes,
document more and so on. How do
yes.
you navigate those complex
Well, I'll tell
emotional
you how I
situations?
did it. I'll tell you how I did it because, because of all this management of production, I made a change. Okay, I made a significant change in the process in the department. And of course, there were two or three that said, wait, wait, we don't want to do this. And right, they were resistant. So here's what I did. All right, let's do this. Let's do this for 30 days. Let's all agree to try this new way. I hear what you're saying, but are you willing to do it for 30 days so that we can test it? And everybody's pretty good about that. Yes, we're willing to do that. So by the end of 30 days, they had already habitualized the new process. So there
Hmm.
were no complaints. So it's about you're thinking ahead of everybody else. It's really kind of like a chess game, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
I think that it goes back to how can I complete this upset? What can I do as a leader to move forward and move everyone forward where everybody's satisfied? That particular solution worked for me when I had resistance within the group.
Hmm.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So what we want to do, and that's the point, we want to give people time to assimilate and
Mhm,
acknowledge the change. Very
mhm,
important as a
mhm.
leader, so that emotions don't get out of hand. We also want to support people in the change, and we want to protect people from themselves. There are some persons who are irrational by nature and they have no reason. They respond to everything negatively. We call them pessimists, or they have certain personality types that by nature are offensive, and they really can't manage themselves, and they can't give you a reason. We have established that emotions also come from childhood. So those who are praised sometimes feel that they must always be the center of attention in your organization because they're the center of attention. Nobody tells them no and so on. So they become adults, and they carry those strings of personality types. There are some persons who are bullied, and so they don't take in their network and in their support system, whether it's friends or family. And so when they come into your organization, they carry that baggage of emotion. And so they are not assertive, and they don't use their initiative, and they prefer to be micromanaged. And there are some persons who are leaders by nature, and they are very assertive, and they know what they're about, and they follow this. And so the emotion, they get really uptight when they are micromanaged. So you would macromanage those persons. And there are persons also who, as we talk about the motivation in organizations, which I have written in one of my books, is really misunderstood. There are some persons who get very annoyed or angry when they are given plaques or given certifications or given awards. They really want responsibility. And there are some who want those plaques and so on, depending on who they are and the emotional stage that they are. We have to understand all of that as we talk about the lifespan of emotions, because emotions really disappear or dissipate when persons' needs are met. And the needs is depending on what will solve the problem at that particular time. Of course, narcissistic coworkers are not able to monitor or to understand the lifespan of their emotions, because it's really a basic emotion of selfishness and
Mm.
getting more and manipulation and getting more and getting more. And so that is a steady emotion that is harder to manage because it is a fully integrated response. Notice the word I'm using. It's not a reaction. It is a fully integrated response that can
Yes.
start at giving persons in their children just constantly giving, saying yes, and allowing them to bully the other siblings. And everybody now is programmed to always meet the needs of this child or individual, especially children who you say are born with certain disadvantages that does not keep them back at all. But we have decided in our minds as parents that it will keep them back and that they must get special attention and that they must be catered to at all times. And these can turn these into monsters who move into people's organizations and oppress them and make them who don't want to come to work. So we want to understand that those things are out there.
Mm.
I
Mm.
want to leave a leadership action plan. I call it the 3 A's for my leaders who want to really move into becoming more intentional and purposeful in their decision making and in how they navigate the team and the organization to get the desired outcomes and results without losing yourself, your identity, or actually losing your head. Because when you have to deal with many persons and you have to be all things to all men as leaders, you can lose your head and you can lose sight of your voice and your vision and your ambition and your purpose, and you can lose yourself. So I'm saying those who want to recalibrate, want to keep themselves and understand themselves and keep themselves together, this is your action plan. And so you want to acknowledge, you want to be aware, and you want to accept, you want to commit to the 6 second pause. When you feel the surge, stop and think, keep your feet firmly on the ground and keep your eyes on the prize. And the prize is that you must do what is the best thing for all persons in your organization and for you. So you must protect yourself and those who are under your care. And then you want to analyze and process and apply. So in the tapering, you want to ask yourself, what is the underlying message of this feeling? What is the data saying to me? What is the insight, the concrete step that I know I have to take based on the insight I have received? And then you want to apply it. And so it becomes a personal system or a team or one for your team where you convert the emotion into positive action. We want to take your final thoughts.
Wow. Well, I just think this is fantastic what you've created. And it certainly aligns with what I know and what I've learned to be true. There's one last thing that I will say about this whole process, which is so good. I learned this 35 years ago. You know how certain things just stay with you over the years? Not everything, but I used this during the tough times in my 33-year marriage. Choose the way it is and the way it is not.
Mm,
When you
mm,
choose powerfully, you are objective, responsive, non emotional, faithful, and heart centered. I used to do this when my husband and I would have a fight, right? And I would remind myself after being pissed off for a while, obviously, right? But I would remind, okay, Leslie, you choose him the way he is most all of the time. Also, you get to choose the way he is not. And it somehow moved me from being annoyed or upset into love. So choose the way it is and the way it is not, because there'll always be an is not for every is.
every is has a is not. I
Yes.
and that's a powerful point to end with, and that's why I love to do my these things with you. It
Thank you.
opens the food for a great deal of thought. We have not exhausted the topic. There is so much more that we could dig into. If you feel that you have learned from this discussion, or you want to continue this discussion, you can actually subscribe to my newsletter if you want to transform your leadership and your life with calm resilience. You can also move into Dr. Leslie's programs. And so you can speak with her to find out, and you can join her on a Monday and on a Friday as she looks at her different programs. You can also grab a copy of My Faith Looks Up, which is a book, a devotional for leaders to help you to maintain and control your emotions, especially when you feel that nothing is going as planned, or you feel spiritually and emotionally dry, or if you actually want to upgrade your faith, your life, and your leadership, you can at least get this book so you have clarity and you can actually fulfill your purpose in every season. And then you want to complete also a free purpose alignment audit if that's where you want to go. On this audit, it's on my profile. You actually get the steps that you can start your way, that starts you on your way to your reborn. And then you can book your free soul sync strategy session if you want to take it a step further and claim your breakthrough. So you want to choose the way it is and the way it is not. It is left up to you. And we want to say thanks for showing up. You're not just remember that you're not just a leader, you're a vessel, and your soul matters. God is not calling you to lead on fumes. He's calling you to lead from overflow. Choose the way it is and the way it is not, and move forward with courage and clarity and confidence, and allow yourself to be master of your own destiny and of your own emotions, and not allow them to master you.
Thank you,
Thank
Doc.
you,
Thank
Dr.
you, Dr. Marcia, for having me. It's always a joy to do this with you, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Same here. I want to thank those who joined on YouTube and those who joined here. Nick, I saw you. I think Alison was there. I also know that Charita was there. Lisa, thanks for being here. Nick, thanks for being here. Franklin, Simone, Sharon. I am just calling off the top of my head, and I hope I have not forgotten anyone that joined, because it would put me in trouble. For those who are going to be watching the replay, please remember to put your concerns, your questions, and also your comments in the chat. We welcome them. The conversation continues next week, Tuesday. Bye from Leading with Light. Have a great day, everyone, and a powerful self-care Tuesday.